Hi, friends. How are you? It's so good to get a chance to read to you. I hope you're enjoying the books that I read to you, especially our at home friends. Yes, if you are listening to these books and enjoying them, please drop me a note and say hi. I miss you guys so much. I have a book here today. It's a true story. It is about Zarafa, the giraffe who walked to the king by Judith St. George. Zarafa was born long ago, at a time when wild animals roamed free. Where was she born? Well, in Africa, of course. When Zarafa was 2 months old, she was caught and carried by camel to a small African village. But she didn't fuss. Even as a baby, Zarafa was gentle and quiet. Egypt's ruler planned to give a gift to the king of France. He wanted the two countries to be friends. Zarafa was the gift, but Zarafa was too young to travel to far-off France, so she lived in a small African village, growing bigger and bigger on camel's milk. The villagers were good to Zarafa. They fed her and took her for walks and treated her like a princess. Zarafa was happy. Before long, she was big enough to travel, but she had to go all the way to Alexandria in Egypt, much too far away to walk. Zarafa would have to sail down the Nile River on a cracky old boat called a felucca. How sad the villagers were to see Zarafa go. Zarafa needed milk on the trip, lots of milk. Hurry and find 3 milk cows. The sailors brought monkeys on board the felucca. The noisy, funny monkeys climbed up Zarafa's neck and teased her. With Zarafa, her 2 helpers, 3 cows, the sailors' monkeys, the felucca was crowded. A little uncomfortable, I think. Not once did gentle Zarafa complain. Sometimes Zarafa's helpers walked her along the side banks of the Nile River. She liked that. After all, she was still growing, and stretching her long legs felt good. If only she were tall enough to nibble on the tender top leaves of the acacia trees. Zarafa finally reached Alexandria. The ruler's palace yard was her new home, and the ruler came to love her. The people of Alexandria loved her too, but Zarafa was a gift to the king of France. She couldn't stay long. She had to sail to France across the Mediterranean Sea in a ship with giant sails. She didn't mind setting sail again. She was as gentle and good as ever. Zarafa's new helpers, Hassan and Natir, led her up the ship's gangplank. 3 milk cows came too. At least the funny, noisy monkeys were left behind. Hassan and Natir loved Zarafa and her beautiful brown eyes and long curly eyelashes. They cut a hole in the deck so that she could stand with her neck and head above deck and see the whole world. To keep the sun out of the rain, Hassan and Natir raised a tent over her head. Aww. That's super sweet. Zarafa watched the sailors pull ropes and move sails. At night, she followed the path of the moon, rising over the sparkling sea. Did the rolling ship make Zarafa seasick? Not at all. She was a good sailor. One of the cows wasn't so lucky. Whoops. When the ship landed in Marseille, France, the sailors bid goodbye to Zarafa, but Marseille was cold and rainy, and Zarafa couldn't travel in such an awful weather. She'd always lived where it was hot and dry. She spent the dreary winter in a stable, but she didn't mind. For one thing, Zarafa had grown to love Hassan and Natir. She licked their faces and loved the milk cows too. When the skies turned fair, they all walked through the streets of Marseille. The cows marched first. Zarafa happily followed, with Hassan and Natir leading her. The people of Marseille rushed to see Zarafa. Police on horseback were called out to keep her safe. Through it all, Zarafa stayed as unruffled as ever. Maybe she knew how much the people of Marseille loved her, and she loved them. By May, the trees and flowers were blossoming. The King of France was waiting in Paris for his gift. Maybe Zarafa would sail to Paris, or maybe she would travel in a cage pulled by horses. No, Zarafa would walk the 550 miles to Paris on her own 4 feet. Her friends Hassan and Atir would walk with her. So would a famous scientist, Geoffrey St. Hilaire, who had a raincoat made especially for her in case it rained. Mr. Geoffrey's carriage led the parade to Paris. The cows, Zarafa, Hassan, and Atir, and an antelope in a cage, another gift to the king, all followed. As Zarafa walked through the village after village, shopkeepers, housewives, farmers, and schoolchildren all ran out to see the beautiful African. Though Zarafa never got a chance to take her afternoon nap, she didn't seem to mind. She was delighted to make so many new friends. Wasn't she a wonder? Zarafa walked 2 miles an hour and was tired at the end of the day. Mr. Geoffrey found a place to sleep every night. Sometimes it was a stable with a high roof. Sometimes the roof was raised so that Zarafa wouldn't bump her head. She was happy either way. But it was a long walk. Zarafa trampled over dusty roads, crossed rickety bridges, and climbed steep hills for 41 days. Was she worn out? Not Zarafa. She was healthier than ever. And look how tall she had grown, over 12 feet. She could easily reach the tender top leaves of the young birch trees. Finally, at long last, Zarafa reached Paris. She had traveled 200 miles by camel. She had sailed 2,000 miles down the Nile River, more than 1,500 miles across the Mediterranean Sea, and walked more than 500 miles from Marseille to Paris on her own 4 feet. Whew, that's a long trip. Now she would be meeting the king, but the king had never seen a giraffe before. Would he like his gift? What do you think? Everyone else seemed to like her. Hopefully the king does as well. Some people are nervous meeting a king. Zarafa wasn't. She was like royalty herself. The king of France looked at Zarafa, and Zarafa looked at the king. Zarafa put on a show. She walked and trotted and galloped. Her long legs seemed to fly. The king couldn't keep his eyes off of her. He was enchanted by this charming gift. The people of France, who had never seen a giraffe either, fell in love with Zarafa. Newspapers sang her praises. Streets, squares, and inns were named for her. Songs, poems, and plays were written about her. Jewelry, fans, wallpaper, and furniture had Zarafa designs. Men wore giraffe hats and ties. Women piled their hair into tall giraffe styles. That winter's flu was called the giraffe flu. Hundreds, no thousands of visitors came to see Zarafa in the king's garden where she lived with Atir, who never left her side. Zarafa had been more than a gift to the king. She had also been a gift to the people of France. Did Zarafa know how famous she was? Probably not. What mattered was that all of France loved her, and she loved all of France. So this is a true story. What do you think? I enjoyed it. There you go. Check it out for yourself. Share it with a friend or your parents. Keep reading.